Welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. And I'm very delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Being a Great Coach Makes You a Better Leader. And I'm really happy to have Ted Herbert with us, and Ted will introduce himself in just a moment. I would like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And generally, I like to introduce the host, but I thought in this instance that it would be great for Ted to introduce himself and share a little bit about his coaching background. Just one housekeeping note that if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. You can add them in the Q&A, and we will leave a bit of time for questions at the end. And we really want to make this interactive and a lot of discussion. This topic has, it continues to be of interest. So Ted, over to you, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Mary Eleanor. Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time at Dalhousie. The first coaching workshop that I did for Dalhousie was actually in 1999. So it's been a long time since coaching's been a topic of leadership development in the course and in the faculty. Now, Mary Eleanor asked me to introduce myself. I've been coaching for a long time. I started coaching way back in the 1970s. So, my interest in the concept of coaching has been there for a long time. I started to do coaching in the workplace in the late 1990s when I realized that the coaching I was doing for athletes and the coaching I was doing for employees were basically the same function. I looked at it and said, what can I be doing to help people perform at a higher level? And basically, I applied the same techniques that I was using with athletes to the people that I was working with in the workplace, and by and large, it works, right? That you work through this stuff, and it's applying a set of principles for the purpose of helping people perform at a higher level. And so I've been doing that for a long time. My first coaching experience was when I dislocated my elbow in my senior year of high school. My coaches said, "Would you help coach the offensive line for your football team?" And that was my introduction to the concept of coaching. And since then, worked through my athletic coaching background comes from working with athletes at all levels, including the Olympic level in the sport of bobsleigh. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I often get from people, well, can you tell us more stories about your Olympic experience with the athletes in the bobsleigh world? And we can do that, but I don't want to take time doing that right now. It's been a long time since I've started this concept of workplace coaching, and I continue to work in the Coaching for Leaders course that's offered through Dalhousie. So we'll get you more introduced to that as we go through the workshop. So let's jump into it.
Okay, fantastic. So let me just pull it up here, Ted, and okay, just 1 second. Okay, great.
We got the slides going. There we go.
We do.
All right.
Yes, sorry for that.
Okay.
Pause there. Okay.
Okay, so there we go. That's the introduction slide. Now, we'd like you to answer a couple of questions. So Mary Eleanor, I'll get you to run the poll.
Yes. Now, let me just pull myself up back here. Sorry. Okay. Let's bring this poll down. Okay. So here's our first poll. In your current role, are you expected to coach others? So we'd ask just for people to submit responses. It's great.
So as you're responding to this question in the poll, just understand that coaching others is something that's been around for a long time. My initial response to leadership coaching was when I worked for a police service in Western Canada. And coaching in the police world is pretty common. When people go through recruit training, they end up being placed in the field with an officer coach, a coach officer. And my experience was that people were asked to provide coaching to new people, new employees, but they weren't given a whole lot of support when they were placed in that role. Mm-hmm. So, question here is: are you required, or are you challenged to coach other people in the role that you're in right now? So, how are we looking here? Yeah, and that's interesting. So we got almost everybody saying yes. 85%, 88% of the people on the call are required or being asked to provide coaching in the workplace. So it's more and more common. It's one of the things that we expect from managers and leaders. So mm-hmm. let's look at the next question in the poll, which is about what you've done to help prepare yourself for that role. So, have you read a book? Have you taken some formal coaching training? Have you watched or listened to some podcasts? What have you done to help yourself be more effective in the role of a coach? So answer that poll, because for the most part, the people that I work with, they're more and more expected to perform the role of a coach, but they're not given a whole lot of support or a whole lot of preparation or learning in order to help them be more effective in the role. So what do we got in terms of?
Okay,
so we've had 30% of you have taken some kind of formal coach training, which is really interesting, and that's 40% actually, and that's unusual in my experience. Many people have been asked to coach and maybe had a little bit of exposure to it through one thing or another, but for the most part, the level of formal education in terms of how to be more effective in a coaching role isn't that common. So thanks for the poll responses. That gives me a little bit of insight into where you're coming from and what background you have. So that's interesting. You go to the next slide, Mary Eleanor. So what should I learn, and why should I be interested in becoming a more effective coach? Well, there's been a lot of research, there's been a lot of effort put into that question. Why is it important that you become a more effective coach? If we click on, there we go. There's a few quotes here. Why don't you bring them all up? That's good. These people are respected business leaders. Zig Ziglar, Warren Bennis, Farshad Alzal. These people have been asked that question, and these are the things that they've said, right? So coaching become a model for leaders. When we look at the concept of coaching in a leadership perspective, being a more effective coach will make you a more effective leader, and these authors are offering their insight into that. Earlier in the early part of this century, a guy named Daniel Goleman, who did all the research, or a bunch of research in emotional intelligence, looked at leadership styles, and leadership styles include things like authoritarian or visionary leadership, democratic leadership style, an affiliative leadership style. One of the key styles that Goleman pointed out was a coaching leadership style. And what we found in looking at styles across the board is that a lot of people don't use a coaching style. Many people find it too time consuming or too difficult to get their heads around, or don't really understand what it means to provide coaching. So what we want to do today is sort of introduce you to some of the things that will help you be more effective as a coaching leader. Now, I don't want to pretend that in a half an hour we're going to make you into coaches. It takes people a long time to develop into effective, permanent coaches. And that's not our intent today. Our intent really is to introduce the concept and give you an opportunity to sort of think about how you can be more effective in that role when people ask you to play that role. So we'll flip to the next slide. And I like to give people this as a way to introduce why we coach in the workplace. So one of the things that we look at when we look at the definition of coaching is, how do we improve a person's ability to perform? Now, as a sport coach, I look at, how do we make them faster on the track? How do we make them more effective in the squash court? How do we make them more effective in being whatever it is they're trying to improve? So we look at it in terms of the components of performance. And this equation really helps to sort of define what we can do to improve people's performance. So capability, motivation, practice, and interference are the key elements of performance. You think about the formula itself. So increasing everything that's above the line and decreasing everything that's below the line will make you a more effective coach and make the person that you're helping a more effective performer. So think about capability. In the chat, if you just want to enter in some of the things that you would identify as capability, what do you think capability means? And as you go through this, think about what would improve a person's capability. What is it that we look at when it comes to capability in whatever it is that they're doing? Having the tools for success. Yeah, those are the things that we do in order to be more effective. Experience, background, functional. These are opportunities to practice, or that's the next thing. But you look at capability, and there's a lot of things. Clear expectations. I have to understand what it is that I'm supposed to do in order for me to do it effectively. So yeah, we have to improve capability, but we also have to look at motivation. And a lot of times people know how to do what it is you're asking them to do, but they don't really want to. I'm not that interested in being a more effective performer in this role. What can you do as a coach to improve their motivation? And you have to think about, passion. They need passion. What can you do to improve their passion or increase their passion? Talked about clear expectations a few minutes ago. One of the things that you can do is actually help them understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing and how that contributes to the end goal that they've signed up for. And then the final thing on the top of the line is practice. A lot of people have the capability. A lot of people have the awareness of what it is they're supposed to be doing. And some people even have the desire, the passion to do it, but they really haven't been given the opportunity to practice it. So as a coach, it's looking at, how can I give that person an opportunity to do the thing that they're supposed to be doing in a way that's going to improve their level of functioning. But don't ever think that because they have all those things on top of the line, they're always going to be able to perform. Because sometimes there are things that get in the way. And as a coach, it's a matter of looking at, how do we reduce the interference? So again, in the chat, just type in some of the things that you've seen that might interfere with a person's ability to perform, even though they may have the capability, motivation, and the opportunity to practice. Stress, lack of resources, fear, that's a really good one. Workload, a lot of things, mental health, fatigue, conflict, all these things are really important aspects of interference. And as a coach, it's a matter of identifying what those things look like and what can I do to reduce that, right? What can I do to reduce language barriers? That's a really good one. Looking at things that interfere with a person's ability to perform. And what can I do to get that stuff out of the way? One of the things that I see quite frequently, one of the things that we deal with in the course that I teach is poor team dynamics. The ability to work with others. And so I've seen instances where, because of toxic cultures in workplaces, employees actually interfere with another employee's ability to do their job because they want to get a leg up. They want to actually trump the performance of the coworker. You know, not stretching oneself, lack of clear direction. All those things are really important elements of interference. And when you're coaching, you got to look at how can I reduce interference so that I can make the most of capability, motivation, and practice. So if we go to the last two bullets on that slide, we're looking at understanding how can you use this equation to help improve the performance of others. And it's, you know, sometimes what I like to do with coaches is get them to keep coming back to this as a matter of diagnosis. So what can you do to improve someone's performance using this equation? So you look at helping to diagnose whether the performance issue that you're dealing with as a coach has its roots in capability, in motivation, in practice, or in interference. And then doing what you can to change that, to make it more effective. So last bullet on this slide is what can you point to as possible sources of interference? And you've already done that. So let's move to the next slide if we can. I want to give you a bit of a story here. And this is both these pictures. So the top picture is myself in the middle, back in the day when I still had a little bit of color in my hair, with two guys who you may have heard of before. This is Pierre Luters and Dave McEachran. They won a gold medal at Nagano in the Olympics in 1998. And I was helping them get to Nagano. I wasn't at Nagano when they won their gold medal, but I certainly was on the track side when they were working their way into that role. And I was coaching them. At the same time, I was coaching the Brentwood Blue Whales under-7 soccer team. You can see them in the bottom right-hand corner. That's me with my arms in the air. And the question here is, what would happen if I used the same coaching approach with both teams? So in the chat, if you want to just enter in an answer to that question, what do you think would happen if I tried to coach the bobsledders the same way I was coaching the Brentwood Blue Whales under failure? Yeah. So think about that when it comes to your role as a coach. You have to look at, number one, what are the expectations? What are the objectives? What am I trying to get out of? Massive confusion. Yeah, so we look at this and say, you know, how can I improve the performance of one? And it's not always the same thing as how can I improve the performance of the other, right? Demotivation is one they would not understand. Yeah, so I want you to think about the motivation part of this. Now, the guys in the top picture are clearly self-motivated. They worked really hard to get to where they are. I don't have to do a lot as a coach in order to motivate them to perform at a higher level. In fact, with people who are Olympians, what you have to do is keep setting the bar higher. You know, every time they achieve a goal, you help them set a goal that's a little bit more stretch. You help them get to the next level. And that's what you have to do with highly motivated, highly confident people. If I tried to do that with the athletes in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, I'm going to get a lot of frustrated parents, and I'm going to get a lot of challenging responses from the kids that I'm coaching. So my objectives with the top group is really to get them to identify where their next goal should be and get them to do everything they can to move to that next higher level of performance. My objective with the people in the bottom picture is to get them to come back and play soccer next year, right? I want them to be engaged in the activity. And whether they perform at their peak as an athlete at an under-7 soccer team, that's not really my objective. And as a coach, I have to use a different style, a different approach, a different communication level. All of this stuff needs to be factored into my application of coaching skills in order to achieve the objective that I want. So think about that as you're working through this whole development of people as coaches. And think about why we do this in a professional capability. If I'm a leader, I want the people that I lead to feel as though they are capable and confident and competent to do what it is they're doing. And I don't necessarily have to be a full-time coach for everybody that I'm leading. What I need to be able to do is use coaching skills to draw out of people the most effective performance. So these are things that today's workplace really has to emphasize. What we find in demographic surveys that are being done now is that the new generation of worker expect coaching from their leaders. They're not looking to get better at what they're doing on their own. A lot of people need help. And when you need help, it's a matter of where do you get it from? And as a coach, one of the great coaches that I've worked with before is a guy named Michael Bungay Stanier, who's written a series of books. One of them is called The Coaching Habit. I recommend it highly. And his mantra is stay curious a little bit longer. You don't have to have all the answers. What you have to have is all the questions. And you have to be able to ask those questions in a way that challenges the people that you're coaching so that they find the answers themselves. So let's flip over to the next slide, Mary Eleanor. What do we learn? So in order to be a more effective coach, what are the things that are built into the challenges that coaches have? And what I do in this course and what I've done since I started doing this work back in the 90s is break this down into components. One of the things that you need to be able to do as a coach is break activities down into their components. So the components that we work through are character, which really means, are you in this for the right reason? Do the people that you're helping, do the people that you're leading recognize that you're coaching them to make them better? You're not coaching them to make you look better. This is about getting people to understand and building a set of characteristics that'll build trust between you and the people you're coaching. So that's the character piece. The next two are really interesting. So you look at observations and assessments. And there's a difference between observation and assessment. When we talk about observations, it's what do we have to see, hear, touch, smell, learn from our environment, from what we're seeing, that'll help us make an assessment. So the observations are what we use to then assess. What I find with a lot of people in leadership roles is that they jump to assessment before they've made observations. And we're actually going through this now in the course that I'm teaching. So those of you that are in the course that are online right now can identify with this question, right? So when we look at observations, it's what are the things that I have to know in order to be able to make an effective assessment? Because my assessment is going to tell me where I need to focus my attention as a coach in order to build performance, in order to improve performance. So observations then lead to effective assessments. And what I find in a lot of cases is that assessment is jumped to very quickly. And sometimes we need to slow down. What Michael Bungay Stanier says, stay curious a little bit longer. Ask more questions, because when you ask a question, the answers to those questions provide you with more observations. And those observations then can fine-tune your assessment. Which leads us to the second C in the coaching acronym, which is communication. And when we talk about communication, a lot of the times what we get from people is, I need to be a better orator. I need to construct my message more effectively so that people understand what I'm trying to tell them. And that's part of it. It's certainly a nice skill to have, to be able to build your communications in a way that helps people understand. But the flip side of that is you also have to be an excellent listener. I was in an improv workshop one time, and my instructor said, one of the key things that you have to be able to do as an improv performer is listen. And he said, you know how I define listening? the willingness to change. So if you're not willing to change, you're not really listening. It doesn't mean you have to change. It just means you have to be willing to change. And if you're not willing to change, you're not really listening. So in improv, if I've got something worked out in my head where the sketch needs to go or how people need to sort of build on a story, and I proceed with that regardless of what other people are putting into the thing in my improv group, we're not going to have a very successful outcome from the improv sketch. In work, it's really when I ask people questions, they provide me with answers, and that gives me a new set of observations. I need to be able to listen to those answers and communicate effectively to the next level. That's where I think a lot of people struggle. So that's communication. The last three things, or sort of the last four things, are help, which means how do I help people understand what it is that they need to do better, right? Help people set goals. That's where we get into goal setting and working on people's ability to understand where they want to go and why they want to go there. It's also looking at how do I understand what my role is as a coach, because a lot of times what we end up doing is overreaching. Sometimes you do things that other people should be doing, and you got to look for help where it's available. Be able to tap into the resources that are available to you so that you can go to the next level and you can talk to people about that. So the last things here are integration, nurturing, and growth. And that's really where we look at the whole organizational concept of this. The integration, nurturing, and growth, or integration is how do I build a team? How do I put people's skills together? How do I get people to actually work together more effectively in an organizational construct and in a team construct? Nurturing is about organizational climate. So how do I build the environment that's actually going to support a coaching level? And then lastly, it's growth. It's about helping people improve their performance and helping you improve your performance as a coach. So those are the elements that we work through when the course is on.
My apologies.
I don't want to monopolize
through
the time here. I know we have a short amount of time, and certainly I'm willing to look at this as a way to improve your understanding. But let's talk. Anybody have questions that they want answered, and let's get into a conversation.
Thanks so much, Ted. We do have just a few minutes left, and I did include some details in the chat on the course, a link to the course where you can find kind of the breakdown of what Ted covers in the course. It will be offered. The next offering will be September 12th. We do have a limited time discount on the course of 5% until the end of this month. So if that's something you'd like to take advantage of. And it's also really important to highlight that if you are interested in how this course might apply to certificates that you might be interested in that are offered at the faculty, this course is either a prerequisite or required, an elective or required course for a number of our certificates. And just wanted to share just a lovely testimonial that was provided to us by one of Ted's previous students. And thanks so much, Ted. It's wonderful to hear your kind of personal lived experience and yeah, coaching is not always predictable. The path isn't always predictable. A great question from Michael here. How do you handle colleagues or employees who take coaching as an insult or a demeaning activity?
Yeah, really good question, because what we have to do, and that's why we go into nurturing in the course, is that you have to have an organizational climate that welcomes feedback. And sometimes I've had people say, well, I don't need to be coached. The only people that need coaching are those people who are struggling with their performance. And what I try to do as a leader is democratize the coaching process. In other words, even those people who are performing at the highest level that they can possibly perform at, look at Olympic athletes, for an example, they still need to be coached. And what we need to be able to do is introduce the concept to the workforce in a way that allows them to see that everybody can benefit from coaching, not just those people who are performing at a substandard level. And you're right. Part of this is generational. I know that when we looked at baby boomers, a lot of times providing feedback on how they're doing was seen as, you don't have to tell me that. I already know that. I'm going to work on it myself. With millennials, it's more of, if you're not telling me, if you're not providing me feedback on an ongoing basis, then you're ignoring me. And these are the things that I need to know in order to be more effective in performing. So that's an excellent question, and it's one that we deal with when we look at, how do you provide feedback effectively, and how do you set up the environment in your organization that welcomes coaching as a gift, not just as a way to remediate poor performance.
There's just a question from Shauna here, and if it's okay with you, Ted, I might just jump in and maybe use it as an opportunity to wind us down, and also just maybe share a book recommendation that you shared with me. It goes back to Michael Bungay Stanier, who was a person who you interviewed recently, and he has written a number of books, one of which is called The Coaching Habit, that you mentioned. And for Shauna's question, what would you do now to build your coaching skills? Certainly, I think one way might be to, I know that he has a blog, is to tap into some of those leaders. And in the email follow-up that we'll be sharing later today, we'll include Ted's email address if you have any questions about the course specifically. And we'll also include an excerpt of that interview that Ted did with Michael Bungay Stanier. And if you're uncertain of the spelling of his name, I will include it in the chat here. But certainly is a good person to tap into for some insights on what you can do now to build your coaching skills. And we will have to wrap up there, sadly. But I do hope that you will consider taking the course and reach out to Ted if you have any questions. And it is worthwhile to review the course details in the link that I included earlier, just where it walks you through the outline and the different topics that Ted will cover in the course. So thank you so much, Ted, for facilitating the session, and lots of thank yous coming in the chat. And please keep your eye out for a link, an email regarding today's webinar with a link to the recording. So for those who missed it, or if you want to share with your peers, feel free to do so, and keep your eye out for that link. Thanks so much, Ted.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. It's one of the things, I could go on and talk about this for hours, but if certainly, as Mary Eleanor says, if you've got specific questions and you want to reach out, feel free to do so using my email.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and stay safe and take care. Thanks, Ted.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.